In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif, Thulin, and I, we are going to share our thoughts on some of the action from Thursday night. We are going to cover some of the top NBA prospects, find out who we believe is playing well, who's helping their stock, and who is struggling. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I am your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, Leif, Thulin, the man that watches more college basketball than anyone else, which means he's not going to be getting a lot of sleep over the next few days.
That's very true.
So before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Also wanted to let you know about the new Locked On newsletter. Your favorite podcast from the Locked On Network has a newsletter. It is a one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage, and it is delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. You can start your day with the all-new free Locked On newsletter covering your favorite team. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode, because we are your daily source, sometimes a couple times a day. We are your daily source for NBA draft content. All right, let's get this episode started. I know you have a lot about to happen for you this week as far as basketball. We got some big matchups. We had a few this week. We started off with Illinois and Alabama, and then last night we had Baylor St. John's. We had Texas versus Syracuse. And so we've had some games where we're able to see some prospects face legitimate competition. And I wanted to start with the Baylor St. John's game. Had a fantastic ending. What were your thoughts on some of the NBA prospects in that game? Was there anyone that caught your attention, whether it's good or bad?
Well, VJ Edgecombe's inefficiency is probably the headline but for NBA players in that game, because VJ Edgecombe coming into the season was talked about as one of the top 5 picks. And I never was fully on board the VJ Edgecombe hype train when he was playing for Bahamas. I think that moved the needle up. But what I saw in high school was a stupendous athlete, not much of a shot maker. And so far, that's what he is in college. And so I think people are being overly critical because when he played for Bahamas, it moved him into this level of being on even footing with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, not quite to Cooper Flagg's level, but in that upper echelon of top tier freshmen. And there's been players such as Tre Johnson, who we'll discuss later, such as Yegor Demon, who have had standout performances, whereas VJ Edgecombe, they wouldn't have won that game without VJ Edgecombe hitting a really difficult 3, but he went 4 of 15. So that's going to be the headline from the NBA perspective.
Yeah, he's really struggled. And it's a situation where if he would have shut it down after the FIBA qualifiers, he probably would have been a lock as a top 5 pick in a sense. And I remember telling my brother that there's nothing that he can probably do throughout the course of a college season that is going to boost his stock higher than what it was after, the performance with the Bahamas national team. And so far this season, he does not look like the same player that we saw in that setting. He is really, really struggling, averaging 11 points, shooting 33.9% from the floor, 20% from 3. Those are not numbers that are going to get you selected in the top 5. Now, I will give him the benefit of the doubt, is that despite the inefficiency, he is finding ways to contribute. He's averaging a little under 7 rebounds per game, 3.6 assists. And the defensive numbers have been good. 1.8 blocks, 2.4 steals. You'll take that from the wing. However, offensively, the flaws have been magnified, like big time. Like the spotlight's on him. He has faced 3 ranked teams, from St. John's to Arkansas to Gonzaga. and he had a couple good games sandwiched between those, but it was what, Sam Houston and Tarleton. He's really struggled against big time competition.
But even those weren't like huge outbursts.
Yeah,
Like that was 30 points between two games, 17 and 13, and the one where he scored 17, he shot 11 free throws. So yeah, I like someone who can get to the rim, and I like his athleticism. But in the other games, when he's played St. John's, when he's played Sam Houston State, when he's played Gonzaga, he shot 0 free throws in 3 games combined. So that's a little bit of a flash in the pan right there. So then he goes 4 of 9 from the field. So of course the inefficiency is going to take the headline. Like I said, he was 2 of 11 against Gonzaga, 3 of 12 against Arkansas, and 4 of 15 against St. John's. Those are 3 top 25 teams, and he's been shooting sub 30%, I think. My quick math says that's lower than 30% to me.
it's definitely lower than 30%.
Yeah,
18%, 25%, 26%.
Yeah, so he's going to be shooting about 23% in that. And then what do you think the best skill is that he's demonstrated thus far? Like, I'm not saying attribute, which is athleticism. The best skill on a basketball court he's demonstrated is rebounding.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that's impressive, but I mean, they say he's 6'5". I'm not all the way sold he's 6'5".
Yeah.
I think he's closer to 6'3". And so I don't see a way at 6'3" to 6'5". We'll give a little leeway there. Guy whose best attribute so far has been rebounding. I just don't know how that's going to translate. I wouldn't be shocked if he falls out of the top 10.
I've had somebody say they think that his best player comp is Victor Oladipo.
Mm-hmm. That's a best case scenario, though, in my opinion.
That's best case scenario. Oladipo struggled. I mean, it wasn't until he got to OKC where he really started to shine, and then he ended up turning into a really good player before injuries derailed his career. It's kind of like, man, I wish he would have signed that deal with the Rockets. I feel like they offered him a deal and he hasn't played since. But Edgecombe is, to me, different than Oladipo, because even though Edgecombe, his assist numbers are solid, I feel like Oladipo showed more upside as a playmaker. I think Edgecombe is passing the ball well, but is more so of like a connector than playmaker. But I will say this: the shot isn't falling. He's playing hard, and if you think motor is a skill, then I would say that is the next best skill. I do think motor is a skill, but if someone said it's an attribute, I can definitely see that. So I do think that is his best skill or attribute right now, outside of being a phenomenal athlete. But defensively, he is stuffing the stat sheet.
Yeah, my biggest issue with him, though, is his jump shot looks bad. Like, I don't feel like they're close often. And so I mean, he went 2 of 5 from 3, and one was the critical one they're down 5 to make him down 2. But if your motor's sensational, that's wonderful. He can put pressure on the rim. He's good in transition. He causes defensive nightmares for people because he's switchable. He does all those things. But the more I look at the NBA right now, the guys who are impacting early in what we considered a bad class, probably appropriately so, have been Jared McCain, Bub Carrington, Dalton Connect, guys who can make jump shots. Well, no matter how good of an athlete VJ Edgecombe is, I don't think he's a better basketball player than Stephon Castle was, because Stephon Castle is bigger, kind of a sturdier build. He's someone that I had at number 1 because I thought, you know what, he could develop into a better shooter, looked better, and he's going to be a defensive pass, get there. But Stephon Castle's having a bumpy journey as well. I watched him last night play the Spurs against my Utah Jazz. And I don't see Edgecombe as being as impactful on a winning team as Stephon Castle was for UConn. And it kind of makes me realize how vital shooting is to this, to making big boards, to success in the NBA draft early in their career. And Edgecombe's shot doesn't even look close to me when he shoots it.
Yeah. And even when you said get to the rim, I always felt like he was too straight up as far as on his drives to the rim. And I do think that he is having difficulties getting to the rim. And you can look at the free throw numbers and see that in the 3 games against ranked opponents, he has attempted 6 free throws. And those 6 free throws came in one game. Didn't get to the foul line against Gonzaga. Didn't get to the foul line yesterday against St. John's. So I think his stock is falling. I just released my first mock draft. I kept him in the top 10 just based off of what I saw in Bahamas, or from the time representing the Bahamas. He's definitely sliding. And the only team that I saw that was somewhat of a good fit for him was the Pacers because they're a team that needs defense, and he has defended well. He is someone that can go out there and that I think is going to give you maximum effort and you can put on a star player. However, I don't even know if he were to go to the Pacers, if there's a clear-cut chance for major playing time. And they are a team that obviously right now they're in the lottery discussions, but he probably becomes unplayable in a playoff situation because he cannot shoot.
I'm with you. I mean, I think Benedict Mathurin, where his downfall is defensive intensity. I don't think it's attributes for him. I think it's defensive intensity. Like if you could take VJ Edgecombe's defensive intensity and put him on Benedict Mathurin, that's a far better basketball player than even if you added Mathurin's shooting to Edgecombe, because Mathurin's a true 6'6", broad-shouldered wing. And so
Yep.
I think he's got a bit of a hill to climb, and I think it'd be really impressive if he was able to navigate the shooting woes in the Big 12, where the scouting reports are great and the defenses typically carry the load for teams in the Big 12.
Yeah, luckily for him, he does have some other games on the schedule, at least marquee matchups that he can turn the corner. But right now, the results have not been good on the offensive end. All right, when we return, I want to talk about Texas and Syracuse and Tre Johnson, who I think has helped himself, and he did have the best game. And then Donnie Freeman, who was a player that I really, really like. But before we get into the second segment, I wanted to talk to you about Robinhood. Robinhood has Robinhood Gold. And with Robinhood Gold, you do not need a silver spoon to eat up financial favors or eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and the perks that are usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25 APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of the high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhoodgold.com. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. The rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, second segment. Tre Johnson had a rough performance against Syracuse. Did not look good on paper. I think he was like 4 for 15 and missed, 7 of his 8 threes. However, he did score the final 6 points of the game, made 6 crucial free throws to help Texas seal the win. And even though he had an off shooting night, he found ways to contribute on the offensive end. And I still think Tre Johnson is a top 5 pick. This was his first rough outing. I mean, he lit Ohio State up. He came into this game shooting like 58% from 3 and 58% from the floor. But what are your overall thoughts on Tre's performance? I know you had some concerns about his shot selection in the first game. Have you turned a corner at all on Tre?
Well, the funny thing is, I feel like I probably had him top 5 after that game. I just hated the shots he took. Like, the talent was undeniable. He made the shots. Well, he shot bad shots, in my opinion, again against Syracuse and went 4 of 18, 1 of 7 from 3. And I think some of those shots weren't necessarily bad. It's not all that he was taking horrible shots to amount to those 18. Many were fine. Many were good shots. He just wasn't shooting as well. But on the season, he's averaging 22 points and 50% from the field, 50% from 3. You can't argue with those numbers, even if the shot selection's hard, and almost makes me more optimistic about his NBA prospects because you probably don't have the congested paint. You probably have spacing and offenses built to maximize your abilities. So I'm actually very high on Tre Johnson. Right now, I have him at 3 on my big board. I haven't fully put it together, but I like what he's doing more than I like what Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey have done thus far. I don't necessarily know if I fully want to have him ahead of them yet because Ace Bailey, I haven't seen play anyone good. Dylan Harper's only played 2 more games than Ace Bailey, so it's not a full-fledged hot take here. But in terms of what he's shown from the college basketball game and just evaluating the college stuff, I think he's had the most outstanding performance of any freshman.
Yeah. Rutgers hasn't played anybody. They have a real test coming up. I believe they play Alabama
Yeah.
this week. So that is going to be must see TV. I mean, I like what I've seen from Ace. I like what I've seen from Dylan, but again, they haven't been tested at all. Tre has at least played Syracuse and Ohio State. So that's definitely fair. Let's talk about Donnie Freeman. Donnie Freeman is a player that I like. I think I'm higher on him than the consensus. I would take him in the lottery as an upside swing. I like the tools. The production and the talent aren't on the same page yet. But what are your thoughts on Donnie Freeman?
Yeah, he's toolsy. Like that's the way I'd describe him. He's just got a lot of desirable attributes at this point, and I haven't seen it amount to a level that I'd be comfortable taking him at the lottery, but I don't hate that kind of idea of like this is the swing because he's got tools, he's got ability to shoot the ball. I know he's only shooting 25% right now, but he's shooting 3 a game and he's making 3 of 12. So I'm sorry, he's shooting yeah, he shot 3 a game. He's played 4 games. He's 3 of 12. So he's 25% from 3. And that confidence to shoot him and not have teammates be like, man, why is he shooting it? Along with his raw size and athleticism. He's had one game where he had 19 and 12 against Youngstown State. And then he plays Texas and doesn't look undermanned as a youngster against really raw physical athletes on the Texas side. I can see it. I'm not quite lottery, but I definitely have him in the first round. I'd probably have him 20 to 25 right now.
I have him at 12. I am high on him. And it just pops to me. Like the potential is there. I see if he puts it all together, you have a combo forward that can play the 3 and the 4. That if he can knock down shots, he can attack closeouts. He's really rebounding the ball well. Didn't have big rebounding numbers against Texas, but he came into that game averaging 9 rebounds per game. Once he fills out, I think he's going to be fine. So I am higher on him than the consensus. Let's talk about JJ Starling. Entered college with some buzz at Notre Dame, transferred to Syracuse. It's crazy that this is year 3 for him. Before this game, he was playing really well statistically. I know it was powered by one. I think he had like a 38-point performance or something like that. What are your thoughts on JJ Starling? And do you think he can rebuild some of the buzz that he had coming into college?
I've never been overly high on JJ Starling. I felt like he's kind of a high volume, inefficient scorer, like gets a lot of opportunities to score, doesn't score super efficiently. This year, he scored efficiently 52% from the field, but he's only 29% from 3. And as someone who's had previous years of struggles efficiency wise, and his highest 3-point percentage shooting year was last year at 32.6%, I definitely have my concerns about the shooting. And then the next question becomes, how much do you believe in his facilitating? Because I think the appeal coming into college was, can this guy be a kind of a big guard who can play both guard positions, be good on both sides of the ball? I believe in his rebounding. I believe in the size translating there. I think defensively he's all right. I'm a little skeptical about his facilitation. And if he's a true 2 guard, then and he can't shoot, that kind of answers the question there. So I'm a little lower on JJ Starling.
Yeah, and he's at that weird tweener position at 6'4", where at 6'4", if you're a 6'4" point guard, it looks good. If you're a 2, then you're undersized. And if you're a combo, then you have to at least show the ability to initiate the offense. I think he's done better this year, but he's still averaging 2.5 turnovers per game. He is someone that I'm definitely going to be monitoring his progress this season. But the 38-point game against Youngstown State was a huge performance for him. In that game, I mean, it was like, first of all, I don't even know why Syracuse is going to double overtime against Youngstown State, but he was 14 of 23 from the floor and got to the foul line 12 times, making 8 out of 12. But yeah, that 38-point game, other than that, he has yet to reach 20. So again, he is someone that I'm definitely going to be checking out the rest of the season. All right, when we return, we're going to wrap this episode up. I want to talk about Chaz Lanier, one of the best transfers in the country, and then JT Toppin, another transfer. And I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find a more productive and efficient player in the country right now than JT Toppin. Maybe Ryan Cockburn, who's shooting like 89% from the floor over 4 games, which is absolutely nuts. but JT Toppin has been efficient. So we'll talk about JT when we return. But let's talk about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the remaining NFL season with FanDuel, which happens to be America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5. You can get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it is all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it is on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. And never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Chaz Lanier had another strong showing for Tennessee. Coming into this season, where were you at on Lanier?
Well, I think the way to frame it is who can replace Connect, and that's what everyone asked, and he's not Dalton Connect. So I felt like by association I was low, which is not a fun way to feel about a player that scored 19 a game the year before, had good efficiency. I will say from watching him at Tennessee, I'm impressed by the way he's still able to play his game and not be sped up, not be influenced by the greater size that he's facing on his kind of mid post and in scoring. And then yesterday he was prolific, hitting 6 threes. That is the type of thing that puts him on the radar. I don't necessarily feel like he's done enough yet because Tennessee has beaten Louisville and Virginia. Neither team, in my opinion, is all that great. I think Louisville could be good by the end of the year. Virginia is not very good at all, but they are good defensively. I want to see him play against SEC size to give a true analysis on how I feel about his ability to impact the game at the NBA standard. But I do think he's going to be a guy who's kind of Antonio Reeves-ish in the sense of he's older, so you don't know how much you have. He doesn't necessarily have prototypical size, and I don't know if he's quite the shooter Antonio Reeves is, but he's a better physical specimen. So I think he'll be on an NBA roster at some point. I don't know if he's going to be drafted, though.
Yeah, the shooting it's legit. I mean, 41% from three for his career, and that is with 109 games of experience. This year, he's at 50% from three on 6 attempts per game, which is above last year when he was lights out, shooting 44% from three on 7 attempts. I always saw him as like an Isaiah Joe type player. Now, I think he shows more, at least at North Florida last year, he showed more than just being able to spot up and shoot. But I do think once he is in the NBA, he's going to have a defined role as a floor spacer and shooter. Maybe he'll be able to attack closeouts. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that consistently, but the role that Isaiah Joe plays for the Thunder is a role that I think Lanier can play. I live in Dallas. Dallas plays the Thunder, seems like a lot. So I've seen what Isaiah Joe can do. Isaiah is a lights out shooter, but he does have a little bit more to his game than just shooting. And so that's why that was my comparison to where, again, the shooting is going to be the skill set to hang his hat on, but there's just a little more that he can bring to the table. So that's my thoughts on Lanier.
Yeah, I think he's got more individual creation, and I also think he can do it at different levels of the floor. I think he's very good in the mid-range, whereas Isaiah Joe's strictly kind of run outs for buckets and when he's near the rim or just straight up shooting. I think Isaiah Joe's a quicker release shooter, which is very valuable when that's your bread and butter. But I think Chaz Lanier is he's impressed me in the way that no matter how stout Virginia's defense is and the pace they play, he was able to get his shots off and be confident in shooting them as opposed to kind of taking the late contested shots that Virginia forces you to take. He didn't head fake and try to play with his food, play in the mid-range. He was very decisive, and that was kind of what I was looking to figure out when he played true athletic competition. And I think it'll only be further something to to evaluate when he plays against better athletes, because Virginia is a very good, well-schooled defensive team. But they're not super athletic and imposing. I want to see how decisive he is and how efficient he is when he plays against some of the athletes that'll speed him up more so than just be stout and kind of contain drives like Virginia does with their pack line defense.
Yep. All right, let's talk about Texas Tech and St. Joe's. The matchup that I was looking forward to seeing was JT Toppin and Rasheer Fleming. And I'm high on Fleming. I think at the beginning of the year, I had him as a top 25 guy. He's probably fallen right outside of that, but he's still in that range. But JT Toppin, who I had outside of my top 30, I think with his production, it's going to be hard to keep him out of the first round. I don't know, other than like Ryan Kalkbrenner, if there's a more productive and efficient player in the country right now. Against St. Joe's, he had 22 points, 18 rebounds, 2 assists. But for the season, get these numbers. I want you to listen closely. 20.8 points per game, 11.2 rebounds, 70% from the floor. He is making 50% of his threes, although it is on a low volume of attempts. But he's also contributing on the defensive end, 1.8 blocks, 1.6 steals per game. It is safe to say that he has made the sophomore jump. Now, my concern is he's 6'9". They got him listed at 225. He's bulked up since last year. Maybe a little undersized to play the 5. But what are your thoughts on him? And like, what is like an early draft range?
Well, the crazy thing is at the combine last year, I was like, man, he really moves well. Like his shot looks significantly better. Everything that he did, I thought was good. And then you just like looked at him in comparison to Zach Edey. You looked at him in comparison to Sarr, all these guys who measured and were enormous. And he was at New Mexico, he was a center. At Texas Tech, he's playing the center. So even though he's shooting better in the combine drills, do I really want him shooting threes? Not particularly, but that's where the NBA is headed. So he goes to Texas Tech, and he's dominating as a center. I watched that game, and other than the mistake at the end where he went over the back, which led the final free throw in which St. Joe's was able to win the game, he was dominant and could not make a mistake. He was 8 of 13, and not all of them were easy, but he made every look makeable, which is not something everyone does. Some people just, hey, I got the ball, I better shoot the layup. Well, he takes his time, gets to his preferred hand, bank shots, floaters. He's really got tremendous touch as well as vertical athleticism. And NBA draft range, it's hard to not have him in the first round in terms of productivity. You just have to have the right team, I think, in order to take a risk in taking a player that is as small as he is for that position, because I think he is a 5 at the next level. Like, could he play like Trace Jackson Davis? TJD was a broader shouldered, bigger bodied guy, but he could be a vertical spacer, someone who plays with making up for his lack of height and width with just explosive verticality.
What do you think is the difference between him and Asa Newell?
Asa Newell's a little longer to me. I don't know that for certain, but the way he moves, I think there's a chance that he can play the 4 as he shoots threes more confidently. And he's a little longer, maybe able to slide differently. Whereas I think Toppin's a really good athlete, but it translates into jumping. And Newell looks a little more, I don't know if it's flexible, but he just looks more confident sliding than Toppin does. Toppin is more hey, if you get by me, I'm going to jump and meet you at the summit. Newell, I think, is a little bit better. He's not a refined defender, but I think he's at least more fluid moving his hips.
Yeah, there are 2 players that I feel like have similar skill sets as far as being play finishers. Maybe not the ideal size to be a 5, but maybe not skilled enough in a sense to be 4. I think Newell is a better passer. They both have great motors. They're both bouncy, pogo stick athletes. And ironically, they're represented by the same agent, Ramon Sessions, former NBA player. But those 2 guys are players that I've compared to each other. And like I said, it's just ironic that they have the same agent. Let's talk about St. Joe's. St. Joe's has a few guys that I think at the very minimum are like G League players, 2-way guys. I like Rasheer Fleming. Rasheer didn't have a dominant performance, but he's a player that I've always felt like he is better than his statistics. Like his talent and numbers haven't always been on the same page. And in this game against Texas Tech, he had 14 points, 7 rebounds. He was 5 of 6 from the floor, made 3 or 4 from deep. I like him. I think he's a top 35 prospect. What are your thoughts on Fleming?
I wouldn't have thought of him as a top 35 prospect, like if I were just kind of labeling out prospects, but I watch him play and he impacts the game. Like Reynolds gets a lot of the headlines for St. Joe's because he scores, and when he's hot, he's really hot, and he was great in the first half. But Fleming is an excellent athlete, and I think he actually was the reason they were able to win this game. Is though Toppin was awesome, he nullified some of those athletically, oh, this team's too athletic for us chances, and he was able to provide that for St. Joe's and give them extra chances, create turnovers. I like what he does. I need to watch him more closely to see what role I foresee for him, but he's an energy guy with the length to match, and I think there's a room for that type of archetype of player on pretty much every NBA team.
Yep, I agree. If I'm not mistaken, he was on the same high school team as DJ Wagner and Aaron Bradshaw. Mm-hmm. And I think if the draft were today, he'd go ahead of them both in the draft. I think he was older than them, but when you think of the prospects from that Camden area or the Camden High School, he was kind of like an afterthought. And now I think that he is, without a doubt, the better prospect. All right, let's talk about Erik Reynolds, a guy that I don't know if he's broken yet or he's within a few games of breaking Jameer Nelson's scoring record. He has been just a really, really good scorer on the college level, big-time shooter, a player that, and in St. Joe's case, thankful, but a player that I'm sure some of the big money schools are coming after him, because he's the type of player that can command significant money in NIL. Stay true, is going to break the school's all-time leading scoring record. Do you think he's an NBA guy?
I definitely hadn't thought of it, but he scored 20 a game as a freshman. Wow. That's really hard to do. I don't care if you're in a Power 5 league or not. 20 a game as a freshman, 17 last year, 17 this year. The team's winning games in which he has these big performances, which is something to always look at. He'd be a diminutive guard. I don't think he's a great defender, but he definitely has the kind of foot speed that you'd hope can compensate. I don't know if he's got the tenacity, but maybe that's because of the workload that he takes on his shoulders scoring the ball. I'd probably say he's undrafted, but I think there's a world in which he can make his way on an NBA team and fill a role. This is not the perfect comparison, especially for being undrafted, but he reminds me a little bit of Trey Burke. Just like he's able to shoot and score, and when he gets hot, he gets really hot. I think there's a world in which he can find a role doing that. I don't think it's a drafted role immediately, and I think Trey Burke's a perfect example from the other sense. You see a lot of those type of guards have gone out of style in terms of being drafted, but they find their way into the NBA on a need-based thing where, hey, we lost a point guard. This guy, wow, he impressed. You're not going to see those type of players drafted frequently, though. So I'm going to say undrafted, but I think there's a world he gets a cup of tea with some teams, not only in the summer league and the preseason, but on an NBA roster in the future.
All right, here's a question for you. Last one. Is he the best guard on their team?
From the college level, yes. I think there's a world in which he's not the best pro prospect, but I'd still lean towards him just because of the sheer productivity for 3 years. Brown's got more prototypical athletic ability. Like I think Reynolds is quick, Brown's quicker and more tenacious, but I'd probably say Reynolds is the best guard on the team.
Okay. We're talking about Xzavier Brown, who's averaging 17 points per game, 6.2 assists, 5.2 rebounds. He hasn't been the most efficient, only 34% from the floor and 25% from three. I think some people may think it's a debate over who is the best guard on their team, but St. Joe's has some players. They at least have 3 players that I think are within the two-way Exhibit 10 range, but I think Fleming is draftable. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Now, please check out the Locked On newsletter. Your favorite Locked On podcast now has a newsletter covering your favorite team. Check it out at LockedOnDaily.com. Like I said, once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Now, stay tuned. Me and Leif, we have another episode coming where we are going to preview some of the top matchups coming this weekend and early next week. Stay tuned.